Assisting me in the opining, my titans of tumult. First, Amy Ridenour, chairman of the National Center for Public Policy Research. Amy, good to have you back.
Thank you, Alan.
On board as well, Robert Weiner, Democratic strategist, columnist, and former communications director for Clinton drug czar General Barry McCaffrey. Additionally, he's former communications director for Congressman Rangel and Conyers of Michigan and of New York and Michigan, respectively. Bob, good to have you.
Good to be with you, Alan.
Actually, Bob, I want to ask you something real fast. After turning down House legislation that would have protected, from harm our vets visiting their memorials, as well as turning down other legislation that would have provided funds for the NIH to insulate kids dying of cancer. Does Obama's message really fly when he says we shouldn't harm the innocent? I mean, isn't Obama preaching to others about not using government to harm the innocent a bit like a skunk calling the other guy stinky?
Well, it just dumbfounded me that
I'm asking a question. Do you understand? Have you heard the
shutdown
words that are coming out of my mouth? Will you respond to the question posed as opposed to responding to a question not posed? Because you do have this proclivity. You love to respond to a question never posed as well as opposing an argument never asserted. I'm asking you, does it ever make sense for a politician to become the embodiment of the very thing he criticizes? He says we shouldn't do things that harm the innocent, yet he himself is directly tied to that very activity. There was no reason for him to shut the vets out of an open memorial for the World War II site. There was nobody that had to be paid for to keep that thing maintained. He harmed people by deliberately ensuring that well in advance the barriers would be placed there just so as to maintain what he thought would be the correct pressure on the GOP to capitulate in his end. Where am I off base, Bob Weiner?
You're off base because you don't pick vets over seniors and hungry kids, which is what the shutdown also was closing out.
Legislation was offered to amend both. Legislation was amending both. So now that we've established that legislation was written to amend both, do you have another answer?
Yeah, I
and what would that be?
That the food programs and the seniors programs and the cancer clinic programs, those were being shut down, and they just wanted the one that had the biggest headline, which is vets. You don't run the government that way.
Amy Ridenour, continuing resolution is going to keep the government open until January 15th. The debt ceiling is going to be extended to February 7th. Verification of eligibility standards for those applying for subsidies at these Affordable Care Act exchanges will happen. Actually, it's going to be more of an audit. Sequester caps remain in place. Now, there was an offer to let government agencies have the discretion to prioritize how these cuts would be applied. But Democrats, again, like the pain it causes the people because, again, they believe that pain places more pressure on the GOP to yield on sequestration, even though, of course, this originated from Obama. Do you really see much of a loss? I mean, it looks like a breathtaking loss for the GOP. But in the final analysis, in the very beginning, we had the Democrats saying we're only going to accept a year-long continuing resolution to keep the government open. That's clean. And we're only going to accept a clean increase of the debt ceiling also for a year. They got neither of those things. It's just that it appears that when looking at the optics, the GOP did far worse because they tried to get so much, and in my estimation, did it through a poor strategy, so that in the final analysis, because they're so much further away from what they were originally trying to get, I think lost in the wash is that the Democrats actually got nothing. Or am I overstating it, Amy Ridenour?
Oh, I think you're exactly right. The Republicans ran a Hail Mary pass with the Ted Cruz strategy. And whether one likes the strategy or doesn't like that strategy, that's what everyone was seeing, and that one failed. So it looks like a failure. But if you had said 2 years ago that we would have funding levels at the sequester amounts, we would all have been cheered by that, meaning the people who are desperately worried, including myself, that we are going to bankrupt this country and end up, with senior citizens who can't get their benefits and they're in their 90s in a couple of decades. So that part is good. So, yes, I think when you step back and take a long view, you say the Republicans are doing fairly well given that they have one house of the legislature and they do not have the executive branch. That said, there were some wasted opportunities in the last few weeks, to say the very least. And the Republicans have got to do a number of things better, one of which is their communication strategy. The Democrats are extremely good at coming up with a few phrases. I'm sure Bob will use some of them before this segment is over. And all their senators use them. All their members of Congress use them.
Yeah, but you know what? They always fail on this show. They always fail on this show, as Van Jones failed on this show. Van Jones failed on this show. We had Gore Vidal failed on this show. What?
They fail when they are asked details, but hardly anybody asks for details. You do. But mostly you get sound bites in the press. And those sound bites are rounded. And the Republicans come up and they'll give this long, wordy answer, which may be the true answer, but nobody even understands what it means. And so I'm just saying, one of the things the Republicans have to do is to have a much better communication strategy so people know what their goals are.
Well, you know what? I've already been asked to go on Capitol Hill on a few occasions, and I've done it where I've given these addresses on that very concern. Bob, we're going to be running short in here, but I promise you a soliloquy on the other side of the break.
I don't need a soliloquy.
Let's kick it off though, because I'm going to be giving you a softball one, okay? And I think any criticism you may have to pass against the Tea Partiers right now will, in part, probably be spot on, and I like them. Now, most polls show Americans not wanting contingencies when it comes to whether or not the government stays open. However, those same polls show most Americans definitely wanting contingencies to be met before a debt ceiling is raised. I got to ask you, in your estimation, why didn't these now well-publicized sentiments have any influence on the Tea Party wing of the GOP? Upon a return, I want you to address that, give me an in-depth analysis, because as much as I like the Tea Party, on this particular battle, they had their heads up their ass. And at one point or another, they're going to have to execute the same capacity for self-appraisal that they so rightfully and righteously have placed at the doorstep of everybody else. It doesn't matter how principled you are if you're going to subject yourself to an unattainable standard. Fighting the good fight doesn't mean crap. Fighting a fight that leaves you with something to show for, that's what matters. You're listening to The Alan Nathan Show. Going to be right back. Every year is Alan Nathan, militant moderate. Once again, this is the oasis for those who have an aversion to the left, right, black, white, two-dimensional approach. You were listening to House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi talking about the end of the shutdown. We have assisted me in the opining. All friends to the show as we continue our post-mortem, looking at these budget battles, how they've reached a temporary end and have immediately a new beginning. Joining us again, Amy Ridenhour, chairman of the National Center for Public Policy Research, and Bob Weiner, Democratic strategist, columnist, and former communications director for Clinton Drug Czar General Barry McCaffrey. Bob, back to you because we've had a bit of a break. Let me catch people up to what we were discussing before that break. Again, the majority of polls show that most Americans do not want contingencies ever attached to whether or not we keep the government open. But those same polls, Bloomberg comes to mind, shows that well over 62% of Americans definitely do like the idea of contingencies having to be met before the debt ceiling is raised. I got to ask you, in your estimation, why didn't these now well-publicized sentiments have any influence on the Tea Party wing of the GOP? Why is it these guys, in your estimation, squandered so much of their political capital trying to wager on a pair of twos when they knew damn well a straight flush was about to be dealt a little further down the road? Bob Weiner.
Well, Amy raised the best point of all, saying that Republicans actually have done very well the last couple of years, and that funding at the sequester levels, it should be perceived as a victory, but they didn't know how to claim victory. The Tea Party came to Washington for one reason, to throw flames, and that's the problem, Alan. They didn't know. No,
not to throw flames. Victory. I think you had it right. They had, as part of their agenda, to bring about what was brought about with the sequestration. It originally came from Obama, but it was the Tea Party pressure that ensured that sequestration was eaten. So to that degree, they, as a representative of their constituents, did for them what the president's claiming he's currently doing for his own, as all the Democrats are and as all the Republican senators are. They're all making that claim, and I think validly so. It's just that quite often we find segments of the country in opposition to one another, and this is manifesting itself through the wars on Capitol Hill. None of these things happen in a vacuum. Amy Ridenhour, to you, though, what about that? Bob brings up an excellent point. You've got this tremendous victory because funding levels, at least for discretionary spending, have been kept at 2008 levels because of these successful sequestration tactics. And it does appear as if the Tea Party didn't know how to handle an already existing victory. Amy Ridenhour.
Well, it's a victory, but it's not enough to save the country. Let's talk about what the Tea Party people want. They want to return to constitutional government, which means the actual Constitution we have, not the one we want to read into it. They also want to have a country that doesn't have deficit spending, and they want to preserve basic liberties, which they believe Obamacare infringes upon. So when the the Tea Party elected representatives and senators, like Ted Cruz, get here in Washington, they want action. They mostly ran and were elected because they were very impatient that the Republicans who are here already didn't seem to be fighting hard enough, and I'm speaking now generally, that the Democrats appear to them to be, and I'm going to use this word advisedly, enemies, meaning on the other side they're not into the Constitution as written, and they're comfortable with continued deficit spending. I'm just saying what the Tea Party perspective is. Right. So what we saw as this year began and through the summer is Tea Party elected representatives going to their leaders, the Republicans who have been here for a while, and saying, what's the plan, what's the plan, what's the plan? They were not hearing a plan, so they grabbed the ball and ran with it. Now, a lot of people could say, oh, you should have waited for the debt battle and not the CR. You should have done this, you should have done that. From the Tea Party point of view, there's always been excuses, and it's time to jump into the battle. And yes, the Tea Party folks learned a lot from this. A lot of things they learned from this. But they also grabbed the ball and they ran with it. And they will not be rookies much longer. So, yes, you could say they made mistakes.
All right, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought that up. Bob Weiner, to you, apropos what Amy said and getting into the thick of it that I know you're going to enjoy. Obamacare was central to the partisan battle over the budget, and while I doubt that the GOP will try the same exact strategy in a few months when these deadlines return, tapping into what Amy just said, it may at least again insist on delaying the individual mandate for a year, just as Obama did the employer mandate. Now, because the polls are with the GOP on this issue, will that demand resurface? And will there be even more pressure on Obama this time because of the disastrous rollout of Obamacare via its 1998-style website?
Well, it has been a disastrous rollout, but the Tea Party wants to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and the American.
I just mean that one thing. I only mean that one thing, not the whole thing. I'm asking about the individual mandate. Only the individual mandate. That's all I'm inquiring about. Do you think they'll probably again press for delaying the individual mandate for a year, just as Obama did the employer mandate?
Get it. The only thing they might get, because it's real, is the fact that the computer glitches allowed only 36,000 to join up, despite the fact that 9.3 million people actually went online to look for it. So we have to correct that, and we have to make up the time, and we have to allow for the time. If by the end of the 6 months we're still at some kind of horrible numbers like that, they will have to extend the time that you can sign in.
Thank you very much for that, because now I want us to just stop. I'm not the centrist. You're not the liberal. Amy's not the conservative. Let's just take our hats off, take those off for a moment, and get to something else. Just as fellow small business people, because that's what we all are. The three of us are small business people. Amy, first to you, then to Bob. It strikes me that this has really been very, very difficult. I have tried to get on this website. I'm not kidding you.
Yeah, it's awful.
I tried to get. I put my name in there, and I answer the prompt questions, for future security needs, the name of your favorite dog and all that, and who your mother once worked for, and you know what I'm saying. And I get through them, and it accepts them, and then when I try to hit, for the next phase, it stops me and says, we can't complete. It's something's out of order, blah, blah. Whatever it is, I'm given another roadblock before I can continue. Amy, to you, even Obama's former press secretary, Robert Gibbs, came out and said this is excruciatingly embarrassing. Yep. Oh, my God, of all people, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And in my estimation, you can't find a more extreme partisan than this limited thinker who's, whose stature is only shortened by her height. What, in your estimation, has to be done before more and more people acknowledge what Bob just said might take place, and that is the necessity of delaying the individual mandate, but for having no other choice?
Well, I'm not in the administration, obviously, but I think they missed a big opportunity here. They should have told the Republicans, okay, let's delay the individual mandate. In fact, they could have said, let's delay all of Obamacare, and then nobody would have known about any of these problems. And Obama could have gone into the next set of negotiations on whatever it might happen to be and say, look, I'm the one who gave in last time, so it's your turn. Instead, what he's done is he's put off a delay on the individual mandate or on all of Obamacare, all of it. He's got it now, and now he's supposed to deliver. From everything we are reading in the mainstream press about how they built these websites, they are not going to be able to fix these for months. And then when they do, assuming they ever do, they're going to be faced with the fact that for a lot of people, particularly the people under 34, the premiums are going up a lot, and they need something like 6 million people under 34 to sign up to make the math work. This thing is not working. Bob said right before I talked, that the Republicans want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's not their view. Their view is there's no baby in here.
Well, no. There's some good things, but I don't think that, Bob, you know me, just as I don't think the bad should stain the good, nor should the good shield the bad. People can right off the gate say, hey, we like the idea of people being able to stay on the parents' insurance policy till they're 26. We like the idea of pre-existing conditions being covered and a number of the other great items. Unfortunately, those seem to be gratuitously outweighed by so many of these negatives. If Obama really is all about the survival of his signature piece of legislation, doesn't it make sense for him to go along with some of the very changes that he has thus far rebuked and rejected? Bob Weiner.
Well, he's got to fix it. For an administration that prides itself on being the Internet king, it's kind of unbelievable they weren't ready for more than 36,000 people in the first week to get them signed up.